This is a Sikha of Chelek Yud Aleph, chapter book 11 in Likutei Sichas, a portion of Voero, the second Sikha. I'd like to start here with a little, shall I say, Milsa de Bedichas, a little lighter note. You've all read stories when a policeman pulls over a car for a minor infraction, or they run, and then they run the license plate. And then they discover, oh no, they've fallen onto some guy they've been looking for years for some major thing. Seems to be, to me, that some of the sikhs, this one, this week particularly, we're going to start with something that seems pretty pedantic, pretty detail-oriented in the words. And we are going to, so to speak, the Rebbe is going to take us into a totally new and illuminating understanding on a plague, one of the 10 plagues, which remained quite elusive before that. So let's jump into it. When we're talking about the Makkah, the plague that's called Orov, Orov means the multitude of beasts that came onto the Egyptians. So it says in our parsha that Hashem told Moshe to tell Paro as following: if you don't send, remember, there's been dam, blood, frogs, tzfardea, kinim, lice. And the fourth one that's coming is Orov, this multitude of beasts that's going to come and attack them. So in the language of the warning that Moshe is told by Hashem to say to Paro, he says, for if you don't send out my people, if you don't send out my people, hineni mashliach b'cha. Now the word mashliach sounds like sholeach. Sholeach means to send, and here it seems similar, mashliach. I'm going to be mashliach to you, the Orov, this mixture of animals. And this mixture is going to fill the houses of the Egyptians. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of this Orov, of this mixture, and also the land which they are on it. So Rashi says, brings the words mashliach b'cha, which, again, just if you wouldn't see the Rashi, you may have translated it that mashliach, shliach, to send. I'm going to send to you the mixture of animals. And he says the word mashliach actually means megare b'cha. I'm going to incite unto you. And we find, says Rashi, a similar pasuk in the book of Devarim, v'shen behemois ashalach bam. I will send the teeth, the animals with their teeth. I will send on them. This is when there's punishment coming. And Rashi says this is an expression of shisui, of incitement. And actually the old French word is incitir. Sounds suspiciously similar to me to the word we have, incite. Right? So what is Rashi? Why does Rashi explain this? So simply speaking, the reason Rashi has to explain these words is to tell us that it's not shiluach, like sending, like shliach, but it's mishaleach. This is a different meaning. The meaning here is inciting. Hashem said he's going to incite a multitude of animals to come against the Egyptians. So, and the Rebbe here doesn't ask something. This first chapter of the Sikha explains why Rashi needed to tell us this. Why can't we say it that it's sending? Why is it mashliach, inciting? First of all, if mashliach here would be sending, it should have said meshaleach, not mashliach. The grammar would be better, would need to be meshaleach. Just as in the beginning of the pasuk, he says, "Im eincha meshaleach esami." If you don't send my people, if it would have meant I'm going to send you the animals, would have says, "Hineni meshaleach b'cha." I'm going to send to you the animals. First of all, so it's mashliach. It's a different word. Number two, shlichos fits better. The Hebrew would have fit better to say mashliach b'cha esa orev. I'm going to send to you the multitude. It shouldn't have said it like it says later on. There's a pasuk that says, I'm going to, if you don't listen, hineni sholeach es kol magevoisai elibcha. I'm sending all my afflictions to your heart. You notice the word, first he says what he's sending, and then to whom he's sending. I'm sending all my plagues to your heart, Pharaoh. So it should have then said here, if it's sending, I'm sending the multitude of animals to you. The fact that it's worded this way, I'm sending to you the animals, so it means it's not I'm sending, it's I'm inciting. Point number three is if it's sending, the word should be I'm mashliach lecha. I'm sending to you. Here it says I'm sending on you. All these three things give us to understand. Let us understand why Rashi translates this as being I'm inciting. I'm going to incite upon you. The animal should come to attack you. Okay, and that's why the when Rashi quotes from the pasuk the words he's commenting on, he quotes the words becha. He also takes mashliach becha. I'm inciting to you because that word becha is important for that word becha is what actually compels Rashi to translate mashliach here not as shlichus, not as sending, but as inciting. Very interesting. I'm not going to go into it, but the Rebbe brings in a footnote that some of the commentaries said Rashi was compelled to say mashliach b'chol means inciting, not sending, because shlichus, appointing something as a messenger, needs to only be done with somebody who has das, somebody who has an awareness, an intellect. It can't be done with animals. But the Rebbe goes from various sources to say that the word shlichus, sending and a mission, can be also used for animals. That would not be an issue in Rashi's world. We find from Gemaras that it could be used. So the three reasons that Rebbe gives, those are the reasons why Rashi is compelled to say mashliach b'cha means inciting, not sending against you. Okay, second paragraph. However, we have to understand in this Rashi, we're going to understand, and we're going to ask now two questions. First of all, when Rashi wants to bring a verse that also speaks about inciting animals, why doesn't he bring the verse from Vayikra? He brought a verse from Devarim, the fifth book of the Torah, where he could have brought a verse from Vayikra which says, "Vishlachti bachem, I will send against you the beasts of the field." That's one. It's in the portion where the Torah says, "God forbid if we don't listen, what are the punishments?" One of the punishments is, "I'll send against you the beasts of the field," and God forbid they'll cause damage. So, and it would seem to fit better because here we're talking about let's explain that in Hebrew there's behemoths, animals, chayos, beasts. So chayos would be like wild animals, bears, lions, and stuff like that. Animals, domesticated animals, sheep, cows, and stuff like that, right? Horses. So there, where the pasuk Rashi brings is in the pasuk in Devarim, the one he actually brings. There it says that I will send against you the animal with their teeth, animals. But here, Orov is not animals; it's beasts, it's chayos. The pasuk he should have brought, we would think, is Vayikra, where it says, where God says, "I will send against you the beasts of the field." Oh, that would fit more with this Orov. Orov was not, domestic, animals. It was beasts. So why does he bring that pasuk from Vayikra? It's also earlier. Also, second question. Let me remind you that Rashi says like this. Let me paraphrase the Rashi. Rashi is like this. He quotes Mashliach b'cha, I will incite against you. That's from the pasuk, and then he says Megara b'cha, I will incite against you. And so we find a similar concept in the book in the pasuk in Devarim, and I will send the animal with their teeth to be I will send them against you. And this is an expression of inciting. So what is he bringing this? But Rashi calls it shisui. The first explanation Rashi gives for the word mashliach b'cha is megare, which also means a lower form of inciting. And then Rashi says, like it says that the animals will be sent against you in Devarim. And then Rashi says, which is a lashon of shisui. Shisui is a very uh, much harsher, much more active form of inciting. The word shisui is to incite. When I say megare, um, Megara is a lower form of inciting. Shisui is a real, very active form of inciting. So why does Rashi bring in general this other word shisui? First of all, do you ever heard the word shisui? The word shisui is actually less known for Megara. There's other places in the Torah where the word Megara is used, but shisui is not there anywhere in the Chamushim Torah, the five books of Moses. Also, issue number two, why doesn't he, when he translates it, he should say megare, which is shisui. In other words, inciting. Why does he bring the verse of the behemoths in between the two translations of the word Mashliach? And more than that, why does he even bring the first level called Megare? Just go straight to the inciting. That's what he wants to say, that the wild beast will be incited against the Egyptians. So it doesn't seem to be understood. Now you can't answer that Rashi wants to say that even though the word mashliach b'cha usually means a more mild form of incitement, here it means the higher form of incitement, shisui, not just megale, but also meshasa, shisui. First of all, so that if that was his intention, he should have, as we asked earlier, should have brought the three words of the pasuk that he's explaining, said the word megare, and then say not just megare, shisui. He put the pasuk in between those two translations, which tells us that this other pasuk about the teeth of the animal being sent against you has some place here, and it's between the two words megare and meshasa, the two levels of inciting. Question number two: how do we know? How do we know that shisui, that in this context, the Torah is saying it's not just going to be the lower level of incitement, but Hashem is promising Paray and the Egyptians that they're going to have the higher level of incitement. How do we know to explain that in the pasuk? If the word mashliach could mean both, maybe it means lower level. Okay. Now, what we understand now, paragraph 3. Later on, Rashi continues in his Pirush and he quotes the following words. He says, Esa Orov says that the words Esa'arav, the mixture of wild beasts. This is now in Rashi. He says all kinds of bad beasts. Doesn't specify which ones. All kinds of bad beasts and snakes and scorpions all mixed together, and they would cause destruction in them. And that was the Egyptians. Continues Rashi, and there's a reason for this in the Agada, in the Medrash, for every single makkah. Why this plague and why that plague? For all the plagues, there's a reason. When the kings go out to do war, they have tactics, and the tactics of war being battled by kings, this is the way that, in other words, that Hashem came in the same tactics, the way kings do battle. When they go and they fight against a city, when they lay siege to a city, first of all, they damage the water sources. And afterwards, they blow loud trumpets with shofars and trumpets to create a fear and a confusion, to create a panic by them. Similarly, the frogs made a lot of noise, croaked, and made tremendous noise, etc. This etc. is in the Rashi, chulu, etc. As it says in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. So now we have to understand what just happened here. Okay, these words of Rashi, we know they're in the Medrash, but Rashi changed them a little bit. They're going to be on this Rashi. We're going to have 6 questions. Within the 6 questions, I must tell you that they're going to be. You're going to see that in question number 2, there's another issue with 3 questions mixed in. So hang on tight. I will also tell you that you could look in the Gutnik Chumash on this pasuk. The pasuk here is, if you have a Gutnik Chumash, I'll tell you the page. It's the page 49. No, not page 49. It's page 51. But you're learning in the Sikha. It's beautiful to go through the whole process, but then it sums it up. He sums it up there quite well in the Gutnik Chumash. Okay, so let's ask the questions on this Rashi. First of all, the Rashi is taka brought from the Medrash, but there's 2 changes. In the Medrash, when it comes about, the Medrash has a discussion about what the Orov was, what the multitude of mixed beasts was. One opinion is that they were bears, lions, and leopards. The other opinion is that they were hornets and mosquitoes. I guess it must be like these big, ferocious mosquitoes, probably. Now, the fact that Rashi doesn't give us any indication what they were, what kind of beasts they were, well, we understand because he just says bad beasts. Especially in the simple reading of the Pasha. Remember, the Pshut Shel Mikra Simple reading of the pasuk. It doesn't make a difference which beast. They were bad beasts. You don't have to say which ones they were. Especially, Rashi could definitely not have said that they were hornets and mosquitoes. Why not? Because when it comes to the frogs, it says that the frogs died. The reason the frogs died and their carcasses were left lying littered all over Egypt is because there's no benefit to be had from dead frogs. Whereas the multitude, the mixture of beasts, they had to have totally been taken away from Egypt. For if they would have just died in Egypt, there would be benefit with their hides. Beasts have hides and skins that are valuable. Now that obviously means Rashi says that the Orov, the mixture of beasts, unlike the frogs, which it says they just died, the beasts, it says that they were all taken away. They had to be taken away because otherwise so the Egyptians shouldn't have benefit from their skins. So obviously that means Rashi doesn't say that it's hornets and mosquitoes because there's no benefit from those skins. They could have just died there and they would have become rotten and that's it, right? So we know that Rashi doesn't hold of that second opinion that were hornets and mosquitoes. However, where does Rashi add? Rashi changes the medrash. He says there was a mixture of wild beasts and snakes and scorpions. Hello, where does that come from? If, whichever way you look at it, Rashi shouldn't have put that in, it seems. Why? If Rashi wants to say it's a mixture of animals, and that also includes snakes and scorpions. So why specify snakes and scorpions? He doesn't say the other kinds of beasts. And if by saying there were many beasts, it doesn't mean necessarily snakes and scorpions, or there's reason for us to think that there wasn't snakes and scorpions, so why does he add that? Not why does he add that? How does he know that there were snakes and scorpions? What indication does he have from the pasuk? In other words, Orov means a mixture of beasts coming as a plague. Well, either that includes snakes and scorpions, and if it does, why specify? And if it doesn't, and that's not what's simply meant in the pasuk, so how does he know that indeed there were snakes and scorpions? That's question number one on this subject. Question number two, why does Rashi say, all of a sudden Rashi shows up and says, oh, you should know that the plagues, there's a reason for the plagues. This is already plague number 4. Why all of a sudden at plague number 4 does he says, you should know that in the Medrash they say that there's a reason, and that's based according to the tactic of warfare. Okay, now to analyze this second question, why Rashi doesn't say that there's a reason for the plagues earlier on. Some give the explanation. Sifsei Chachamim gives like this. He says the first 3 plagues, there was no need for Rashi to explain the reason. They're very self-understood. Why was blood and frogs brought as a plague? Because the god of the Egyptians was the Nile. By afflicting the Nile to turn to blood, so in that way, there was a blow taken at the thing that they feared, at their deity. Also, frogs. We know that the frogs came out of the Nile. This too was a continuation of the concept of taking a blow and bashing that which they feared, their deity. And that's why you remember why Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to. He was told not to hit the Nile and not for frogs and not for blood, because the Nile, the river, had been his protector. And it was inappropriate for him to raise his hand and smite the water which had protected him when he was a little baby and he was floated on the river. However, of course, you can understand that the frogs is the next level. It's not the actual water. It's what's coming from the water. That's why the first plague was hitting the water became blood, and then the next plague degenerated or advanced to the next stage, the frogs which come from the water. What about lice? So we understand there's no need to explain why that plague took place. That's simple. Hashem was bashing their deity. When it comes to lice, there's also a reason when it comes to lice. What's the reason? We understand it doesn't need to be a reason, because the lice was what caused the Khartoumim, it caused the magicians to say that this is a finger of God, because you remember they weren't able to produce, the magicians weren't able to produce little creatures. They can only, their dominion, their power only goes to bigger things. Little things like lice, they couldn't pull out of the hat, so to speak. So we understand that Hashem needed to prove that, they needed to say this is from God. Okay, so that would seem to be a very simple reason why Rashi doesn't, only in Orov, the fourth plague, does Rashi jump in and say that we need to know what's the reason for the plague. For every plague, there's a reason. I hear that I've asked like this. Three issues here. Three issues here. First of all, if the reason that Rashi brings this medrash is only to explain the fourth plague of the mixture, he actually doesn't bring that. He says in Tanchuma they give also a reason for the mixture. He just brings the reason for the blood and the frogs. So if he's coming to explain mixture, he doesn't even bring the mixture. So why does he put it in? Number two, if the three first plagues, as the commentaries we just quoted, that the three plagues are self-explanatory why they were done. So, right as Rashi come and bring this medrash that brings the reasons for the plagues, because it's like the kings that wage war. First you get rid of the water, then you come and make a big noise to confuse them with the frogs. We just said the reason was very simple, to attack their God and to show to show the finger of God when it comes to lice. And Rashi brings a medrash that says different. Number three, a question on this. According to that, really, the continuation, this is a nuance. The continuation of this Rashi is really just to explain the reason for Orov, the reason for the fourth plague of mixtures, of the mixture of beasts. It's something on its own. It doesn't seem to have any connection with the first part of Rashi, which explained what was Orov, that Orov was a mixture of wild beasts. So we know that when Rashi moves to another concept, even if it's on the same words, he'll bring those words again. So there'll be a heading. So the heading here should have been the Orov, the mixture of wild beasts, and tell us that this is all kinds of chayas, all kinds of beasts, and snakes and scorpions. And then there should have been again a new heading, Orov. Then he should have said, why was Orov brought? For every plague, there's a reason. It was one of the tactics. Rashi puts this all in one long explanation on that first word, explaining what Orov is, which means that this is not two separate details. There's some kind of flow here about beasts, snakes and scorpions, and then a need somehow to bring from the Medrash the reasons for the plagues, and only when we come to the fourth plague, we have to understand this. So this was all question number two. Remember, we're still asking questions on this Rashi that explains what Orov is, and then brings the Agada about the reason for the plagues in general. The third question on this Rashi is, Rashi brings blood. He says the way that kings do is that they first ruin the water supply, but it doesn't say, so did Hashem do here in Egypt, that he ruined their water supply. It doesn't, in Yiddish we say, he doesn't choice. He doesn't translate that into our situation here. With the frogs, he does. He says, just like kings like to create a confusion, similarly here, the frogs were created to make a confusion. So why by frogs does he say similarly here, whereas by blood he just says that kings try to ruin the water supply of a city they're laying siege to. Full stop. He doesn't say so too here. Hashem wanted to ruin the water supply. And the Rebbe in the footnote says that you could say that, okay, by the blood plague, you don't even have to say it. It's obvious. He says that the king lays siege, he ruins the water. Obviously, that's what was happening with the blood. Yeah, but with the frogs, that was also obvious. Because Rashi had already said that the frogs went into their stomachs and were making noise. So we understood the frogs were noisy already. Why here? When Rashi explained to us the plague of the frogs back there where the plague came. So why here does Rashi have to be so explanatory? Only about the frogs, but not about the blood. Question number 4. Rashi says this is a reason in Agada. Why does he emphasize that it's Agada? I mean, the fact that there's tactics with kings and that this was a tactic in fighting the Egyptians, this could also be Pshut Shel Mikra, simple Pshat. Why emphasize this is an Agada? Number 5, why does Rashi says the reason for the Orov, it says in Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. I mean, what's it got to do here if it's in that the fact is that's in Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma? He should just said there's in the first place where he says there's a reason for this in Agoda. He should have said it, the Agoda of Rabbi Tanchuma. Why first explain the Agoda quote and then end off his pirush. So it says in Rabbi Tanchuma's medrash. Question number 6: why does Rashi quote also the words es he'orev? Now that's a really nuanced question. The Rashi's heading should be Orov, ha'orov. All he's doing is explaining the mixture of beasts. Why does he also bring the word es he'orov, the beast? The word es, why does he quote that as part of his heading? Okay, Abir b'chol zeh. The explanation for all this is, as I said, we stopped. Excuse me. It's like we stopped. It's like a cop who stopped the thing. He thought he just had some license plate. We had some questions on the Rashi, on the wording. Now the Rebbe is gonna uncover a new world for us. Paragraph 4. The explanation of all this is as follows: in every one of the plagues, the ones before this fourth one of mixture of beasts, the ones after ones. So it's very understood what is the punishment and what is the content of the retribution that was brought against the Egyptians. Whether it's from the way the wording used to warn Paray, or in those plagues that there didn't come an explicit warning before by Moshe. You see it from the way Hashem describes to Moshe when he's telling him what to do in order to bring the plague. In other words, you know what the plague is from the introduction of the plague, either by Hashem telling Moshe what to do and how to do, or by Moshe's warning to Paray. When it comes to this makkah, this plague of Orov, of the mixture, all it says in the warning is, if you don't send my people, I'm going to incite on you the mixture. And they're going to fill the houses of the Egyptians and the land that they're on there. It doesn't tell us what this mixture is. A mixture of what? And what's the punishment about it? What's the retribution with sending a mixture? If you send somebody a mixture of chocolates, he'll be very happy. He'll send you the mixture. What mixture? So that's why Rashi says that in the word mashliach b'cha, there's already an indication about what it is he's sending. He's sending something that is being incited. It's not sending. I'm going to incite against you that which is incitable. What is incitable? We've already said that the word mashliach here can't be sending. It's I'm going to incite against you. What is things that can be incited? Well, we understand right away if it's something that can be incited, then it has to be a living thing, it has to be an animal. And we understand that when you incite the animal, so we understand that they get upset and they bite and they cause destruction. So we understand what this mixture is. Hashem, in other words, Hashem doesn't say, I will send you a mixture. That could be a mixed chocolates. I will incite against you a mixed multitude. Oh, what do you incite against somebody? It has to be an animal. And they're going to bite and cause destruction in Egypt. Now, the fact that the Torah only says, I will incite against you a mixture, it doesn't give any other details about what the mixture was. Right? It doesn't even say that they were animals. We only know it because the word mashliach is inciting. Inciting can't be something inanimate; it has to be animals. That's the word of incitement is used in the context of animals. This tells us that through this we will know something we didn't know without this. In other words, the main chidush, the main novelty of this miracle is that many kinds of beasts came together. All the other details were nothing unique. In other words, if the Torah didn't identify what was unique about this plague, it said what was unique is, I'm going to incite against you a mixture. It say I'm going to incite against you lambs that are going to be venomous. Well, that would be a big plague? Lambs that are usually so docile become venomous? No, no, no. I will incite against you the mixture, and that's a plague. But what kind of mixture could it be? Obviously, the incitement has to be a mixture of beasts, not animals. Because if it would be animals, lambs and cows that are coming and destroying and biting and killing, then that would be a miracle that the Torah would have indicated. I'm going to incite against you vicious lambs. And then we say, oh, this is a miracle. But this is not brought in the Sikh. I'm just thinking here, for example, the butter, the hail, the hail, we're told that it was, right, it was fire and water together. It wasn't just regular hail. It was fire and water together. This is part of and this is described in the Torah. The fire in the hail. If there would be here a something unnatural besides the fact that it's a multitude being incited, but there's something unnatural or miraculous about what's happening after that, it would have been indicated. If that's the case, if there was only beasts that are damaging beasts that cause destruction, so why did they need to be incited? Why does he say, I'm going to incite them? They're always, wild beasts are always dangerous. We don't want to meet up with wild beasts unless we're in a car, in a safari. We wouldn't want to be in the safari without a car facing bears and panthers or whatever it is. So that's why, to answer this question, Rashi says that the Lashon Shisui, Mashliach, is to incite. In other words, even though that the word mashliach could also be a lesser incitement. There are various levels in incitement. There's regular, ongoing incitement, which animals don't need, beasts don't need special revving up. They're always in a state of being predatory in some sense. Then there's a different level where they become riled up and they become incited against their prey. So which causes them to damage even more than they would usually do naturally. And here, because we're talking about beasts, so we have to say that actually it wasn't just that they were in their natural state. We want to say that Hashem is saying, I'm going to incite them to a state where they're going to become more predatory, they're going to be more dangerous. Nonetheless, points out that but this wasn't something that has to be pointed out in a special way in the pasuk. It's not something unnatural for them. They're predatory animals. They're animals that cause destruction. But Hashem is going to incite them more, like wind them up, so they're going to be, ready for the go, ready to come in for the destruction. So that's why Rashi brings the proof, first of all, when he says, Mashliach b'cha, I will incite against you, which is Megara, I will incite. He says, this is a language that's also used for animals. That's in Pasuk Devarim. It says it about animals. Vayikra, it says it about Chayas. But Rashi Dafka brings the Pasuk says about animals. Because first Rashi wants to say that Mashliach is to incite. And he brings a proof from the pasuk that it says about animals. There also we could talk about inciting them, because they're not usually incited. The lamb is docile. But they can be, when Hashem wants to bring a punishment, they too can be sent against people, humanity, and become predatory. After he explains that in general, when that the animals can be incited, he says, but in this case, you didn't, because it was wild beasts. We know that because the Torah didn't give us didn't tell us anything else unnatural that took place. Just said it was a multitude that came against us. So we know it was a multitude that's already predatory, which is beasts. But he wants to say that here, Mashliach, even these beasts were super revved up, Shisui, more than Megara. They were extra beefed up in their predatory tendency here. Okay. According to this chapter, paragraph 5. According to this, we'll understand that what Rashi continues and says the explanation of the word es Orov. Now Rashi explains what is the multitude. He says all kinds of wild beasts, bad beasts, and snakes and scorpions. They came mixed up and they were causing destruction. So he says Rashi is not mainly coming to explain what was in this mixture of beasts. That's already understood from the fact that the Torah said, I will incite against you a mixture. We understand already they're wild, bad beasts. Again, not little docile lambs. We understand already they're wild beasts. But he's coming to say mainly that the point of Orov, that they came in a mixture. And that's the main point, and that's the main novelty of this affliction, of this plague, was the fact that all these wild beasts came mixed and together. And because he had to write that they came together, so he also says he says that they were all kinds of wild beasts and also snakes and scorpions. And that's why he quotes S, because in other words, he's trying to explain what kind of a mix it was. There's all kind of wild beasts, snakes and scorpions. We'll soon explain where he gets snakes and scorpions. But that's why Rashi also proves. Remember, we had this nuance. Why does Rashi bring in his heading S he'orev, the orev? It should have said he'orev, the S, because from that S, what do we see is that Hashem is saying, "Behold, I'm going to bring upon him the mixture." Doesn't sound so scary. The mixture. So Es He'orev, it means that this is the plague, the fact that there's a mixture. Ah. In other words, if this would just be a detail of the plague, it wouldn't have said, "Behold, I'm bringing upon you the mixture." You say, Es He'orev, I'm bringing upon you the mixture. We understand that the mixture aspect of it, this is the plague. This is the whole content of the plague. So that's why Rashi quotes in his heading S, because that tells us that the whole issue is not what kind of animals. The fact that there were many kind of wild beasts, destructive beasts together, this was the plague. According to this chapter, paragraph 6, according to understand why Rashi doesn't explain bears and lions and panthers. Why? There's no proof, according to Rashi, in the simple reading of the pasuk, which kind of wild beasts there were. Whatever beasts that were available in the Egyptian, in the what is it, the sub-Sahara? No, it's not Sahara. Is it whatever that the Egyptian, the Nile Delta area, whatever there were there, that's what could come. It doesn't have to. You don't have to say dafka that that there were bears and lions and things. Whatever was available. In terms of reading the simple thing, the puzzle, there were bad beasts, whichever ones. Because if you once you put a label, which kinds are there, so it would seem to be that Hashem has to come and bring these miraculous Amazon or African species to be near Egypt. No, that would already be another miracle. Rashi is emphasizing the miracle is the fact that they all these beasts that were around, these destructive beasts, whatever was available, they came in a mixed way. That was the plague was the mixture of it. So Rashi just says Chayesrois, bad animals. Whatever was around. Give me a couple of dozen whatever's around and send them in Egypt. Paragraph 7. From this reason, we'll also understand why Rashi explains and needs to say also snakes and scorpions. Why? Because this pasuk itself says that the wild beasts will come against the Egyptians and the land which they are on it. If the pasuk would have said that the mixture will fill the houses of the Egyptians and also the land that they're on it, in other words, that that it's the mixed multitude of animals that's going to be on the land. Okay, but here it says that the houses of Egypt will fill. The house of Egypt will be full of the Orov, of this mixture, and also the land will be full of the mixture. How can the earth be full of the mixture? So Rashi says the earth will be full of the mixture. If you read the pasuk simply, the houses will be full of all the beasts, and also even the earth will be teeming, will be full of a mixture of wild beasts. What kind of wild beasts are naturally teeming in the earth? If you're going to say that there's going to be lions coming up out of the earth, that's a miracle. That takes the whole plague and makes it a different kind of plague, not just a mixture. It's also it's also elephants coming out of the earth. I don't know, or whatever, wild rhinoceroses coming out of the, or lions coming. No. Remember, this Rashi is going with his path, that the miracle, the plague part here is that they came together, that Hashem sent all these wild beasts together. Not that they came. So what was the earth? What part of the earth was full of Orov, of the mixture? Would have to be things that had come into the earth. Snakes and scorpions. Right? So and then they're not acting unnaturally. The fact that they all came, that was the plague. Hashem brought all these things together. However, Rashi doesn't make a big tzimus out of it, doesn't make a big issue out of it and bring a separate heading and so on for this, because Rashi really came to explain that the whole point here is the mixture. Once he explained the mixture, he also explained the detail that helps us understand the pasuk that says the earth will also be full of this mixture. That's snakes and scorpions. Chapter 6, but now we have to understand the actual. Let's get now to the actual concept. What is this plague of mixture animals? Like what's unique about it? So I'm going to bring the mixture of animals. So that's why Rashi comes and says, by the way, for every plague there's a reason. Because through this, by getting into the reasons, we'll understand what Hashem is doing by bringing the Orov. Says Rashi, when the kings use tactics to come and capture a city, so they ruin the water, and then they blow with trumpets to confuse and to startle and to cause fear in the people. Similarly, by the frogs, they were croaking and making loud noise, etc. In other words, what Rashi is bringing is that one of the tactics of battle is to do things that cause fear and panic, and so panic amongst the people. And this is what Rashi is bringing from the frogs. That same thing was in the Orov, the mixture of animals. The reason that Hashem brought these beasts in a mixture is in order to create a fear and a panic amongst them, a behola, a shock, why? Because when one species of animal comes, it's bad, it's a danger, but it's not so frightening. When all kinds of chayas, when all kinds of beasts come together, mixed up, this creates a big scare and a big panic, big fear. And because Rashi is trying to explain the meaning of what was this plague and the sending of the mixture of beasts, that's why Rashi brings the reason for the makkos here, because here's where we have a question: what was this mixture all about? And continuation to that, and as in a continuation of explaining what we asked before, why doesn't Rashi divide it into two headings? Because after Rashi explained that the whole point is the mixture, he goes on in that same heading to say, but what's the point of the mixture? Why is that the plague? And he continues and says, because it's every plague has a reason, just like the tactics of the kings. And in this case, the tactic was to make them all scared from the noise, from the bahala, from the multitude coming together to panic and fear. And now we'll also understand why Rashi only brings the reasons for the first two plagues, because all he wants to get is to explain about frogs and the noise and the panic, and then we already have the reason for Orov. It doesn't have to, you can just say etc. Doesn't have to bring the rest from the medrash. It's not relevant here. He's got to the point. It creates the so panic and fear. We also understand why explains more clearly the reason for the frogs. He doesn't explain he doesn't spell out about the blood. He spells out about the frogs because the frogs, spelling out about the frogs, explains to us why the multitude of beasts is a big plague, because of the fear aspect. Nonetheless, Rashi first had to tell us it's from the Haggadah. Why? Because it's true that these reasons also could fit in simple pshat, but the fact is that according to simple pshat, there are the other three reasons the reasons for the other makkos we enumerated, that Hashem was fighting the deity of Egypt, and that the lice pointed out that this is from Hashem and not magic. Those are simple reasons. We don't need the Agada about the tactics to explain the first three plagues. That's why Rashi only brings it here to explain about the mixture, Orov, the fourth plague, and he says it's Agada, right? Through this Agada, we need this Agada now to explain to us why the mixture. But the first three plagues we didn't need to bring a medrash. That could stay. The medrash could stay a medrash. We could understand the first three makkos without a medrash. Paragraph 9, however, still not fully understood. Why? Even though Rabbi says it's not mamish a deep question, but there's an aspect here that's not clear. Why? And that is, even though the coming together of all the animals is something that's going to really create a panic and a confusion and a fear, but why is only the mixture mentioned? I mean, the real damage is the fact that these animals and beasts are coming and biting and clawing and doing what predatory animals do. So therefore, it says, why isn't that mentioned at all? It just said the multitude, the mixture is the only thing that's mentioned about this plague as being the ferocious is the plague, the mixture. So that's what Rashi says and hints at the answer to this. It says, as it says in the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma, because there the Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma in his Medrash points out that the noise and the bellowing and the shrieks of these wild beasts was even worse, created an even worse effect, an even more damaging effect to the Egyptians than the actual destruction from the animals. So from this we can understand that with the Orov, um, no, about this is, I'm sorry, about the frogs. The Medrash of Tanchuma continues and says that the croaking and the thing was even worse than what the frogs did in terms of damage. So from this we can understand a hint that also with Orov, with this mixture, that don't think, yes, predatory animals, I'm sure they did a lot of damage, but don't minimize the fact that the fear from the noise and the shock that so many animals are coming together with such a mixture. Don't think that that's a little thing, because by the frogs, that was even worse than the damage the frogs did, was the noise. So in other words, the aspect of the Orov, Rashi's hinting here, it's also pretty bad. That's why Rashi says v'chulu, etc., because it's the etc. is not about the other plagues. Etc. is to continue the discussion about the plague. Rashi started to explain about the frogs. They make a lot of noise, as it's in the Medrash, and he says, etc. Etc. is to continue the discussion about frogs. That noise aspect was really so horrendous that it created a great negative effect on the Egyptians. Because Rashi wants to express this as being the reason that the Orov, this mixture of beasts, is actually a big thing. Not just the predatory damage they did, but also even that whole shock is a very big it has a very strong makkah affliction. It's a very strong plague. Okay, chapter 10, paragraph 10. According to what we explained, here we open an interesting discussion. This is like the following. According to what we explained before, that the main reason for the three first plagues, a simple reason, they don't need a medrash, they're very simple. It came to fight, to beat the deity. Blood and frogs, they worshipped the Nile, that took care of them, right? And the lice was to show the hand of God, the finger of God, because the magicians couldn't deal with such, couldn't pull lice out of the hat, it's too small. So we will understand something else. When in this Makkah, the fourth plague of this mixture, the Torah says, Hashem says, I will separate the land of Goshen where my people are where my people are. There's not going to be any plague of mixed animals coming there. In other words, that they didn't, where the Jews lived, the mixed animals didn't come. So here's a question. Why by all of the other makkahs, by all of the other three first plagues, it doesn't say that? And if it's clear that obviously it wasn't there by the if it's clear that obviously it wasn't there by the Jews, so why by Orov does the Torah have to say explicitly? It says in the pasuk that it's not going to be by the Jewish people. What do you mean? All the other ones also weren't. So were the first three plagues by the Jews, or weren't they? So there's a few opinions Rabbi brings. Ibn Ezra says, according to my opinion, the first plagues of blood, frogs, and lice was both by the Egyptians and by the Hebrews, by the Jews. And that's because they weren't so destructive anyway, so Hashem didn't have to make a miracle that they shouldn't be there by the Jews. However, with the fourth plague, with the mixture of animals, that was a very destructive plague, so Hashem made sure to separate the Egyptians from the Jews. The Radvaz comes and says, what the Ibn Ezra writes, that the first three plagues were also by the Jews, can't believe such a thing. It's forbidden to believe such a thing. How much more so because the psukim, the actual verses, tell us exact opposite narrative. What does the verses say? It says that the Egyptians couldn't drink from the Nile. And so the Egyptians dug around the Ya'ar. It tells us how they got water. It doesn't say that the Jews had to do that. From this, we have an inference that the Jews didn't need to do that. They could just drink from the Nile. By where they were, the water didn't turn to blood. And about the frogs, it says explicitly that Hashem says, tell Pharaoh that the frogs will come to you, to your people. And then it says that when the frogs went away, it says the frogs went away from you, from your houses, from your servants, from your people, which is clearly evident that it's by you. It was talking to Egypt. It wasn't by the Jews. Similarly, about the lice, um, from what we know about blood and frogs, it wasn't by the Jews, as it's pretty explicit in the Torah. So obviously, lice also not. And the main thing is, if the Jews also suffered the same afflictions, how would Paro get the message that it's a fight against him? So you see, it's just a natural phenomenon. It's happening to the Jews too. The Rambam, in his explanation on the Mishnah, writes that blood and frogs were not at all by the Jews. However, with fleas, it was by them too, but it didn't cause them any pain. Now, Rashi doesn't say any of this. Rashi doesn't say yes or no. Did the Jews have the first three plagues or didn't they? He doesn't even hint at it. So, according to Rashi, we have a question. If so, why does it say about the fourth plague? Hashem says, "Oh, I'm not going to bring it. I'm going to separate Goshen. The fourth plague is not going to come against the Jews." Rashi should explain why is the fourth plague different. In other words, uh, uh, um, not why the fourth plague different. Rashi would have to explain if the first three plagues also didn't come on the Jews, why only by the fourth plague does the Torah say it explicitly? So from the fact that Rashi doesn't ask that, it seems that Rashi understands that yes, the first three plagues did come on the Jews. And that's why the Torah doesn't say it didn't. When the fourth plague, Hashem is saying that's not going to come on the Jews. That's why there's no question. The first three, it didn't say it didn't come on the Jews because it did. Oh, why? But the Radbaz asked some good question. What did the Radbaz asks? The Radbaz had asked, why would the Torah emphasize the Egyptians didn't have what to drink, right? And it said that the frogs would go in you, speaking about the Egyptians. So, well, the Rebbe says that's simple. That's because that's the point. The main thing is that the Egyptians didn't have water to drink, and that the frogs went in the Egyptians. But the last question that Abbas asked is a very strong question. How would Paro get the message that what's the point of doing the plague if it's also coming on the Jews? It's supposed to just show that Paro is and his people are the bad guys, right? So Taka, why did the first three Makkahs come to the Jews? What was the point? So the Rebbe says, according to this, we can understand the first two Makkahs, according to Rashi, were in order to fight against the deity of Egypt. So we have to understand that by the fact that his deity, the deity of Egypt, Pharaoh's deity, the Nile, was smitten, with this he knows that Hashem is Hashem. The fact that the Jews were also smitten, that doesn't take away from the message that Hashem is Hashem and he can fight against the Nile. And on the contrary, this is the reason, in order to totally negate the deity of the Nile, it also had to be in the part of the Nile that was by the Jewish people. Because if there would have been part of the Nile left out of this, where the Jews were, it wouldn't have turned to blood, or where the Jews were, there would be no frogs. Paro could have said, there's two parts. There's a split deity here. The part of the deity in Goshen, where the Jews are, that's still stronger than God. God can't do anything against that. So it had to be total knockout. Hashem had to knock out the Nile at its entire length, had to turn into blood. And the fact that the Jews also had blood, no, they also had blood, but they also have to drink around the Nile to get water. But the fact is that the Nile is total knockout, both in blood and both in frogs. That's why, in simple reading of the pasuk, it also was there in the Jewish part of the Nile. Similarly, when it came to fleas, because the point of the fleas, the kidney, the lice, was in order to show that it's the hand of Hashem and it's not coming from magic. So if it wouldn't be in the land, if it wouldn't be by the Jews, so what could they have said? They could still have said, Moshe and Aaron, maybe they are able to create lice. You see, they're controlling it. It's not going against the Jews, right? In other words, if it's not going to be borderless, it still may allow the magicians of Egypt to say that hmm, it could be that this is still happening through magic of Moshe and Aaron. And even though we think you can't, we the Egyptian magicians can't bring up lice because it's too small, maybe Moshe and Aaron can. But they can just do it in a certain area on the Egyptians. Maybe they can just. So that's why it had to be lice that was borderless to show that it was coming from Hashem. It wasn't limited. It wasn't a limited lice. It was a kinim. It was a lice that came as an affliction, as a plague, not just a localized, which then they still could have said this is perhaps some kind of a sorcery, that Moshe and Aaron are bigger sorcerers than us, but it's not the finger of God. So it's, in order to prove it's the finger of God, the lice had to go everywhere. However, when it comes to the multitude of animals, and there's no reason. This is simply that the Egyptians should be smitten. They should be beaten up. So there's no reason for it to go to the Jews. There's no point in making the point. So then Hashem says, I'm going to keep the Jews out of this. And on the contrary, I guess in this case, Pharaoh sees it's a fight against him on behalf of the Jews, because the Jews are saved at all. I will tell you that in this, for reading about this aspect, that the Jews also had the blood turned into whatchamacallit, into blood. This, for example, is where the interpolated translation of Kahas Chumash is fantastic. So when you read the Kahas, you get like this: there was blood everywhere in Egypt, wherever the river water was drawn. And here in the interpolation it says the plague also affected the river in Goshen where the Jews lived, in order that Pharaoh not have the opportunity to say that the Nile, the Egyptians' deity, was immune to God's plague there. The people were, however, able to dig wells that provided fresh water. This made it clear that the object of the plague was only the Egyptians' deity. So anyway, this is a beautiful translation there. It's translated into the Chumash. Okay. Beautiful. So we have here again. We started with some words, and we got into a whole explanation of what this plague was. This plague was a multitude of beasts coming together. The mixture of it was the scary part of it. You know, when you have one thing coming against you, it's one thing, but all of a sudden there's this mixture, and it's overwhelming, and it's scaring, and the noise, and the fear, and the bahola, and the panic, and now we get a little bit to understand what kind of a thing. You know, I don't know if I should use this muscle, but maybe I will. You know, we're in COVID time now with COVID-19, the virus, and everybody's fixated on that. Imagine, God forbid, you know, when they started hearing about an English mutation, a South African mutation, or anytime you talk about a mutation, God forbid, or another disease or something, more, you know, a few together and so on, that creates even greater panic. So this Orov, this predatory beast all coming together was very destructive and very scary. Paragraph 11. Now the Rabbi gives us the teaching from here. Wow, is this a teaching? Oh wow, is this a teaching? The previous Anyanim. In the inner reading, we can understand. We can say, says the Rebbe, why Dafka Hashem created a distinction between the Jewish people and the Egyptians in this plague. Because in the first plagues there was no great reason to create a distinction between the Egyptians and the Jews, because even if the Jews had this same affliction, nobody would think that through this there can be any mixing with the Egyptians. This wouldn't blur the distinction or the boundaries between the Jew and the Egyptian. That was the water turned to blood or whatever it was. But here, Hashem brought something that showed a blurring and a tearing down of boundaries. All usually wild animals go in herds of their own kind. Lions with lions, and panthers, right? And then bears with bears, and so on and so forth. Here, Hashem pulled down the boundaries, pull down the distinctions, and they all came together. Snakes and scorpions and bears and chayas, all these kinds of things came together. So it would be possible, says the Rebbe, somebody could have a machshevet zchut, somebody could have a foreign thought, an alien thought, to think that Hashem has totally taken away boundaries and borders, that mixing, blending That's the name of the game. And God forbid, perhaps the boundary that clearly delineates and defines between the Jew and the nations of the world is, God forbid, uh, um, taken away or diminished or blurred. So that's why Hashem had to show that even at the time where there's a mixing and a taking down of various boundaries in order to create this plague, but still remember the distinction between the Jew and the nation of the world is strong and more defined, because in this mixture plague, Hashem created a clearly delineated border. It went to the Egyptians, it didn't come to the Jews. And we understand the teaching here. The lesson is very simple. Especially when there is a confusion and a mixing up in the world, when the boundaries are torn down, and this the Rebbe is saying this Sikha in 1972, boundaries have been removed in a way that never was in the history of mankind. That's when we need a special strengthening to strengthen and establish firmly the boundary that exists between the Jew and the non-Jew. For then, even when we are in a society like Egypt, in other words, like Egypt was before the Torah was given, even in a way, so to speak, the way we were before Hashem chose us from all the nations, where there was a real danger we could have become assimilated and mixed in with the Egyptians. Hashem, even then, before we had been so clearly chosen, Hashem, even at that stage, made a special miracle. You know why it's a special miracle? The Rabbeinu Bachaya says that, when wild animals come, they don't stop, they're wild. Are you going to tell a wild animal, go till here, no trespassing, hello, going to go through? So that had to be a special miracle Hashem had to make, that they didn't come to the Jewish area, right? To make a distinction. How much more so in our time, when we are after giving of the Torah, and Hashem has so clearly chosen us to be unique and to be special. So for sure, Hashem has clearly delineated the borders between Bnei Yisrael, between us and the nations of the world. And this distinction and this border applies to every single Jew. Don't think, maybe it's only for the strong, devout Jews. No. What kind of Jews were there in Egypt? Jews that were in Egypt, well, at that time, there were still Jews that didn't even want to leave Egypt. There were Jews that were tenuous. They were really just hanging on by the teeth. They were what we call B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna. They're just nicknamed the Jew. That's not even what they feel their real entity is. Yeah, they're part of the Jewish nation, but they weren't really convinced about being part of the nation. Nonetheless, even for that kind of Jew, remember, because many Jews died at the plague of darkness, the ones that didn't want to go out of Egypt. Here we're at the fourth plague. Those didn't die yet, so you had a large, maybe even a majority of the Jews that were not going to leave Egypt. According to that medrash, that Rashi brings, it says only 1/5 left Egypt. So anyway, you have a large amount of Jews that are not committed or devout or going to leave Egypt. And yet Hashem says, even for them, He's going to make a miracle. They have to know that there's a clear distinction between the nations and the Jews. We dare not, if I may say it I may say perhaps in words like this: with all the universalism that we have from society around us, with all the fudging and breaking down of boundaries, it's even more critical, which is represented even by the Orov, by the mixture of beasts, even more critical to establish the main critical unnegotiable boundaries. And in this context, the Rabbi is saying between Jew and non-Jew. When the Bnei Yisrael will strengthen this, in other words, because obviously to spell it out, the Rebbe was campaigning very strongly that a Jew is somebody who's born of a Jewish mother, and if they become converted, have a gear according to the standards of halacha, with a beis din and so on, and that distinction dare not be blurred. There has to be clear distinction. When Bnei Yisrael will stand strong with this mechitza, with this boundary, then what will happen is, by having strong boundaries, where we need to have boundaries, there won't be any boundaries or any divisions between us and Hashem. And every single Jew, man and woman, will come back to Hashem with a full teshuvah, and then will be immediately redeemed with the Geula ha'amitis v'ashlema, the true and complete redemption through Mashiach Tzidkenu. It's been a long sicha, beautiful and illuminating, as always. Thank you.